The United Nations mission in Afghanistan said this week that civilian casualties in Afghanistan rose 31% in the first half of 2010. It says in its mid-year report that 1,271 civilians have been killed in war-related incidents in the first 6 months of the year.
Afghan civilian casualties have increased by 31% over the same period last year, 2009. 31% more than last year. Afghan civilian casualties. By casualties, we include the people who have been killed and people who have been wounded.
You mentioned in order to avoid the civilian casualty,
31% means what in real terms, in human being terms? 3,268 civilians during the last 6 months, Afghan civilians, have been casualties of this conflict.
The UN in Afghanistan says anti-government forces were responsible for 76% of the casualties, and that 386, or 12%, of the Afghan casualties were due to United States, NATO, and other pro-government forces. They also say the number of children killed or wounded has risen 55% compared with the same 6-month period last year, with 176 children killed and 389 injured. Meanwhile, NATO forces admitted this past week that their troops, as well as Afghan soldiers, killed a number of civilians during a joint operation in eastern Afghanistan, hours after U.S. troops were urged to avoid hurting non-combatants. Local officials say at least 26 civilians were killed during 2 separate incidents. The tragedy occurred right after General David Petraeus, in a directive, emphasized the need to avoid killing civilians as part of U.S. military strategy, saying, quote, "Every Afghan civilian death diminishes our cause." Mohammed Hassan, head of Nangarhar's Kogyani district, told news agencies that between 12 and 14 people had been killed in one incident. He said villagers were carrying the body of a flood victim for burial when they were bombed by NATO planes. The Associated Press also filmed bomb damage in the district of Shirzad, where village elder Rahmatullah Shirzad told the agency that 13 people had been killed. Abd al-Qadir, described as a relative of one of the victims, said, quote, "If these infidels and crazies are not going to leave our country, we are going to attack Jalalabad city, and then there will not be any governor or Afghanistan's President Hamid Karzai." Mohammed Hassan told Agence France Presse that 14 people were killed in the second incident, in which several houses were bombed.